Hey there guys, I'm back and we'll go ahead and get into the current stuff. So I found Flat Earth finally and I was like, hey, this is making sense. I've always been skeptical of the NASA thing. I wrote a paper about it in high school and I was like, this whole moon landing thing doesn't make any sense. Why can't you see the stars? Why can't you, it just doesn't make any sense. It's all distorted and I wrote a huge paper on it in high school, how none of it made sense, the flag and there's no gravity, there's no atmosphere, so the gravity's a quarter of what it is here, and they still look like they're jumping off the ground, and it just never made any sense to me. So I did this whole documented paper on it in high school, and I was just really skeptical of it. So Flat Earth for me was kind of when I started looking at it, and it was I started watching it. I watched the first thing that I saw was Mark Sargent's Flat Earth Clues, and I just kind of clicked on it because it was a recommended video or whatever. And I kind of clicked on it, and I was like, this was before I even looked at the biblical aspect of it. I was actually really into reading at this time. I was really into reading books about how the church was bad, because Hannah and I had a feeling for a year. We're just man, we really want to do house church. So we designed our entire house around doing house church, because we wanted to have house church, and that's what we felt like God was calling us to do. So we've literally designed our entire house around it the entire time, and that was our ultimate goal. Was our main floor is for having people over. We wanted to be able to entertain and have people over and be able to do church in our house. So that's what we felt like God was calling us towards, and I'd started feeling like the church was just not doing it for me. It just wasn't what I wanted. The more and more I went there, the less and less and less I felt like it was where I belonged. And it had nothing to do with the people or anything else. It just didn't feel right. The worship didn't feel right. Nothing felt right. So I was reading books at the time, Pagan Christianity by Frank Viola and George Barna. And I was reading Houses That Changed the World by Wolfgang Samson, German house planter. And he actually has some really cool ideas that I'll talk about at a different time. But that's what I was reading at the time. So I was trying to dig further into that, Hannah and I are reading Francis Chan's book about marriage, and just how marriage in the light of eternity and growing together. And that's what our Sunday school class was doing and everything. So, we're reading that book together, and it was recommended by the pastor and his wife. So we've been doing that together and just trying to grow closer through that and trying to figure out, our roles and everything. And so I slam into Mark Sargent's Flat Earth Clues, because I was looking into, giants and pre-flood Genesis stuff and all these conspiracy theories and CERN and all this. I was starting to look at all this stuff, and I'm like, well, this is really weird stuff, And then I ran across Mark Sargent's Flat Earth Clues, and I'm like, well, this, there was one of them, the plane thing. And the plane thing just hit me, because I'm military, and I've seen planes and been around planes and been in planes and flown in planes all over the place. And, the thing that got me was the spin, the 1,020 something mile an hour spin or whatever. And I'm like, how does a plane land on a north-south runway if the runway's moving away from you at 1,000 miles an hour? I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. That really doesn't make any sense. How does a plane land on a runway that's moving 1,000 miles an hour? That was the first thing that hit me. I'm like, the planes don't make any sense. And then I'm like, and the planes in the southern hemisphere, how they can't GPS track them. And I've been skeptical of satellites for a really long time. I'm like, if there's that many satellites out there, and there really is that many satellites out there, people are just launching satellites left and right. There's thousands of satellites out there. I'm like, number one, how are they ever going to launch anything into space without hitting a satellite? Number two, how do the satellites not just jam into each other? If they're constantly doing what NASA says they're doing, and they're just falling and falling and falling faster and faster and faster, how are these things not slamming into each other? They're in orbit. They don't control these things. They don't have navigational systems on them. satellites, like the biggest gimmick ever. I'm like, that's a bunch of crock. Like, there's no satellites out there. Like, how would they ever keep them pointed at the freaking Earth? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, that there's no satellites. Like, think about the absurdity of satellites. Like, so I was over that before that even, like, that question ever even came up, and I was like, oh, satellites, yeah, ha ha ha, satellites, stupid. We can launch these little tin cans through the Van Allen radiation belts, right? So, like, I'd never stopped to question the fact that, like, we'd sent astronauts through the radiation belts in the 60s and didn't have any problems with that, but yet they can't figure out how to do it today. Like, that kind of stuff, like, that didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So, in the meantime, like, I'm doing this kind of research, and I'm like, I don't want to bring this stuff up to anyone because I'm like, I am going to get called an idiot. Like, this stuff is making sense to me, but it doesn't make, so I wanted more. Like, I'm one of those people that I'm not just going to go out there and stick my face out there and get stuck in the mud. Like I told you, when I was a kid, I got bullied all the time, so I don't like that feeling. Like, I don't want people to laugh at me and call me an idiot and everything, so I was like, hey, here's the deal. Like, I'm going to learn more about this stuff first, and then, then I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to tell people about it.